President Bola Tinubu arrives India for G20 summit, begins consultations with top-level investors.
Tight security deployments ahead of ruling by the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal.
And DSS apprehends suspects over diversion of palliatives.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall be discussing effective communication in governance.
All right, let's quickly remind you that yesterday President Bola Tinubu marked 100 days in office since he took over running Africa's largest democracy from former President Muhammadu Buhari on May the 29th, 2023. Now, President Tinubu ran his campaign on an agenda known as the Renewed Hope mantra. And in it, he canvassed to be elected to play his part in addressing the myriad of challenges that confront the country and also promote growth and economic development.
Prior to nominating ministers and seeking their clearance and confirmation by the Senate, there were speculations on who will make it to the cabinet and what shape and character the government will take. Eventually, the president did the needful and put to rest the expectations and permutations and anxieties, if you like. Now, that characterized the waiting game.
So after the Senate did its own part, 45 out of the 48 ministerial nominees who appeared before it were cleared and confirmed. That gave the president the go-ahead to assign portfolios to those ministers and subsequently inaugurate them, giving them the mandate to serve Nigeria and Nigerians and to give their very best to the development of Nigeria. And now, if you recall, the president told the new ministers in clear terms, excuses will not be accepted. Those were his words.
Of course, the ministers have since assumed duties and hit the ground running by taking on issues that were pending in their various ministries and agencies. Many of them have been receiving briefs from the permanent secretaries, directors and heads of agencies to fully understand and appreciate what is on ground and how to effectively carry out a renewed hope mandate of Mr. President.
Now, one area where, public concern has been, paramount is the Ministry of Communication, which they say is key to the success or otherwise of every government. Now, as it were, the ministry provides the nexus between the electorate and the government in areas such as execution of social contract between them. Now, some have suggested that information and communications is the oxygen on which every government survives.
Indeed, clear and proper information management is not only important at the federal level, but across the states, local governments, as well as with other elected and appointed officials who have a duty to effectively communicate with the people in the discharge of their duties. In doing so, there is a clear need to handle information and communication using trained professionals who understand the concept of information management. And talking about engaging trained professionals, you will recall that President Bola Tinubu appointed Muhammad Idris Malagi, founder and chairman of Blueprint Newspapers, as well as a radio broadcast station. As the Minister of Information and National Orientation, he was one-time secretary to the Newspaper Proprietors Association of Nigeria and a fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations. Many say he fits the job based on his achievements and, of course, antecedents in the profession.
Of course, just to add that he also succeeded the immediate past minister, that's Alhaji Lai Mohammed, who was also in charge of propagating government's policies and programs and actions to the generality of Nigeria. Now, the president had also, in addition to the new minister, appointed Ajuri Ngelale, that's another media practitioner, this time as his special advisor on media and publicity. So both of them have the mandate of telling Nigerians what the renewed hope agenda of Mr. President is all about, as well as harvesting feedbacks and taking same to government for necessary action. Now, many people are saying that this task is quite enormous and a difficult one, considering the dynamic nature of communication and information in our today's modern world, driven, of course, by social media, whose control and supervision has been anything but challenging, if not impossible. Now, the same scenario also applies for those appointed to head the ministries of communication and information across the states. Now, that brings to bear many questions. What strategy, I should say, does government information managers need to evolve in engaging Nigerians by ensuring that they get timely, accurate, and reliable information? But how do they engage the traditional and new media in the ever-dynamic communication superhighway? That's a very fundamental question. In addition to that, what role does the Ministry of Information and National Orientation and all agencies under it have to play? Now, to what extent can the scourge of fake news, hate speech, misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, and what have you, issues like that have to be addressed? These are very, very pertinent questions, Kirian, and of course Nigerians definitely want to be in touch with the government that they have elected into office and also engage those at the end of affairs for dividends of democracy. So much has been said. We shall be discussing with our experts on what may be the best options or the alternative options for effective communication and governance. And it's on this note, I warmly welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria this Wednesday. I am Claire Adelabu Abdul Razak. And by the way, Kiran, today is also Judgment Day.
Yeah, exactly. And people are waiting, Nigerians are waiting to hear the verdict of the tribunal. Yes. And we shall also be joining our team at the Presidential Election Tribunal to give us a live update as the tribunal delivers its verdict on the elections. I am Kirian Umar. I join Claire to also say welcome to today's show, the final edition for the week. Well, not necessarily, because of course we are just at the middle
midweek edition.
Exactly.
Midweek edition.
Now, we shall be bringing you other segments that will form today's package, which will include newspaper review, business, of course there is sports, and foreign news. For now, let's engage Anne Jibono, who has the highlights of the news this morning. Hello, Anne.
Hello, Kieran and Claire. Good morning. Here's the news. Undeterred by a long intercontinental journey, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu on Tuesday arrived New Delhi to the immediate embrace of Gopichand Hinduja, the chairman and CEO of the Hinduja Group of Companies, a conglomerate with a total asset portfolio exceeding $100 billion. The Indian industrialist was received by the president within 90 minutes of the president's arrival in India for a meeting which began around 8 p.m. local time. Accompanied to the meeting by Nigeria's Minister of Finance, Trade and Industry and Foreign Affairs, the Nigerian leader made it clear to his first visitor that he is in India with one focus: attracting investors and investment to Nigeria with lucrative opportunities for investors, but most essentially jobs for Nigerians and new revenue opportunities for Nigeria's federal and subnational governments. The Hinduja Group chairman told the president that he was a living witness to his landmark effort as governor of Lagos in turning a coastal erosion and water encroachment crisis into a massive free trade zone where industry now thrives. This, he said, was partially responsible for his excitement to partner with Nigeria's new president to create win-win prosperity for Nigeria's talented population. The president thereafter assigned the ministers of trade and finance to draw plans of investment with the Hinduja Group chairman to the satisfaction of both parties. The federal government has charged the new National Council on Nutrition to prioritize innovation and research in its quest to transform the nation's nutritional landscape. Vice President Kashim Shettima gave the charge while inaugurating the council at the presidential villa. Force has strengthened its deployment across the nation to forestall any breakdown of law and order that may arise as a result of the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal judgment scheduled for this morning. In a statement, the force reiterates its commitment to ensuring the safety of lives and property before, during and after the judgment. The Nigeria Police Force hereby cautions individuals, including mischief makers and political gladiators, to be cautious in their actions and statements, as the force will not condone any act capable of inciting violence. It also calls on all citizens to embrace peace and maintain calm regardless of their political affiliations to ensure a peaceful and secure environment. The Department of State Services says it has received reports from some state governments relating to diversion and sale of palliatives meant for their citizens. The DSS spokesperson, Dr. Peter Afunaya, in a statement, notes that the service undertook an investigation and has recovered some of the items as well as apprehended the suspects. The service enjoins members of the public with information relating to this emerging trend to report same to the relevant security agencies for necessary action. Henceforth, information regarding activities and intervention programs by the Renewed Hope Initiative will enjoy wider coverage. This is in order to capture more women and other vulnerable groups targeted by the initiative across the country. Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris Malagi, stated this during a courtesy visit to Nigeria's First Lady and National Chairman of Renewed Hope Initiative, Oluremi Tinubu, at the villa.
Our role is largely to support Mr. President in the execution of his policies, but she also has our own pet projects. We discussed about that and how the Ministry of Information, like I said, and National Orientation can help in disseminating that to the Nigerian public.
In another development, the Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris Malagi, has appealed to Nigerians to exercise more patience with the current administration, which has demonstrated the will for national transformation, growth and all-round development within 100 days in office. In a statement, the minister equally appealed to Nigerians and the labor unions to continue to support the government and show more understanding and work collectively to revive the glory of Nigeria. The statement added that in the last 100 days, President Tinubu has offered purposeful leadership and set the administration's tone, texture and character. The minister said appointment of ministers and allocation of portfolios bolstered the growing global confidence in the direction the president is taking in Nigeria. The action, he believed, has renewed the trust of both the local and international communities in the ability of President Tinubu to revamp and retool the political economy for collective and shared prosperity. That's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kieran and Claire. Thanks for staying with us. I'll be after this break.
All right, let's quickly talk about business now. And the organized private sector are also calling on President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to continue to woo foreign investors, especially at the G20 summit. And the NNPCL is intensifying anti-theft battle with recurring oil output declines. Let's join Tokwe Alabi for some business news.
The organized private sector has told President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to seize the G20 summit holding in India to woo foreign investors to the country. This came as leaders from the group of 20 G20 economies meets in India's capital this week to find solutions to some of the world's pressing problems. The Director General Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, Segun Ajayi Kadir, said the president must take advantage of the G20 platform to sell investment opportunities in Nigeria to the international community, noting that the G20 summit presents an opportunity to sell the huge investment potentials of the Nigeria's economy, especially the manufacturing sector.
The largest collection of the biggest economies. These are the movers, the prime movers of the world economy. And so when they gather to discuss, they are the ones that direct, that shape the direction of world economy. And so it's a very good opportunity to go and market the country.
G20 nations represent 85% of the global GDP, and its nations comprise 2/3 of the global population. Nigeria is one of the 9 guest nations at the G20, as inviting guest nation is routine for G20 summit hosts. In the meantime, the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited is stepping up efforts to combat oil theft in the Niger Delta as the country's oil production continues to drop. Available reports in the fight against crude oil theft showed that almost 300 illegal pipeline connections were uncovered in Rivers, Bayelsa, and Imo states, as well as about 100 illegal refineries in the Niger Delta, mostly in Bayelsa state, which were uncovered in Abua and Bokoda, had been destroyed.
The people working in these oil companies, the security agencies should be made to account for what is happening. So that's why I'm saying there are no spirits or ghosts coming to steal our crude oil. It is the people who fix those pipes. It is the people who are living in that area and who have mastered that art that are doing it. And it is very easy if the government wants to control it.
So far, 8 incidents of pipeline vandalism causing 5 cases of oil spill in the deep blue waters were reported in a total of 144 incidents. The group managing director, NNPC Limited, Mele Kyari, said the country was working towards ramping up crude oil production by about 200,000 to 300,000 barrels per day latest by October, so that the country could push for an increased quota at the next OPEC meeting in November. With business news, I am Tokwe Alabi.
Thank you, Toba Alabi. We appreciate that. Next for us on the show is a review of today's national dailies, newspaper review.
Okay, Chukwudi Okedegbaja is here with us for the newspaper review. Chukwudi, you're not in brown today.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I'm protesting your calling me Mr. Brown without saying it.
So
how are you, Kirian?
I'm good, Chukwudi.
You're sparkling white.
Yeah.
I almost think you're angelic. How about I know better?
All right.
That's a salvo from me.
You kickstart, Claire.
Well,
start with the leadership.
Because in leadership. Okay, let me lead with it. Okay, leadership newspaper. Let's begin with that. Above Indian flag. 2023 polls. That's the kicker. 5 judges decide Tinubu Atiku Obi's fate today. That's on page 7. Below that, we have Otedola Laut Sanwo-Olu over completion of Lagos Blue Rail. It's also on page 7. NMPP expels Kwankwaso, ex-chairman Alkali dumps party. All that stuff on page 4. Now the lead story says Labour strike suffers partial compliance over cracks in union. With 2 riders offices, banks shut in Abuja, Bayelsa, Kano. Action breach of due process, says state chairman. You get all that story on page 4. All right. Here's Insurance Group posts 20 billion revenue for 2022. It's on page 26. SGF's office budgets 108 million naira to organize presidential media chant. That's on page 14. Edo Deputy Governor withdraws suit against Obaseki. We capture that on page 23. New travel restrictions for non-UK citizens. On page 7. Okay, let me quickly also run through the Nation before Claire comes in with the Punch and others. The Nation newspaper. Above the nameplate, federal government targeting 2 weeks for passport issuance. That's on page 4. Now, CBN to clear $10 billion forex backlog in 2 weeks. It's on page 2. Otedola, read that before on the other newspaper. Otedola lauding the governor of Lagos State for the blue whale takeoff. All right, the lead story on the Nation. I will break all barriers for investors, Tinubu assures. Billionaire Indian businessman Okay's automobile manufacturing deal with Nigeria. You get the story on page 2 of the Nation. Of course, the newspaper, of course, has a picture story here, celebrating 100 days of courageous leadership by His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the President of Nigeria. Claire.
All right, let's look at the Punch. Heavy Securities Tribunal decides Article B's petitions against Tinubu. That's the lead story on presidential poll. Police block entrance to Court of Appeal, warn politicians against violence, and 5 justices decide Atiku Obi's petitions today. Security agents patrol Abuja. That's the lead story on the front page of the Punch. And above the nameplate, Lagos, Katsina, Sokoto workers shown NLC, strike grounds Abuja and states. Airport bank workers ignore strike, Maritime Union block Warri and Lagos ports. Contractors protest as FG dumps asphalt for concrete roads. And dollar debt, CBN repays banks next week, Naira may rebound. Fund regional rail projects, FG tells governors, and World Bank delays 8.6 billion naira loan to Nigeria. At the foot of the paper, Tribunal sacks Kogi senator, orders fresh election, and DSS nabs Nasarawa officials and traders for diverting palliatives. Abuja's second runway ready in 12 months. That's Kiamo. All these stories are trending on the front page of the Punch. I just wanted to get a bit of the palliatives diversion in Nasarawa State to actually get the details. The suspects were accused of selling the palliatives in the modern market in Lafia, among others. Of course, who are the suspects? Would like to see if we have the identity of the suspects. Among those suspects are officials of Nasarawa State Emergency Management Agency. Chukwudi, did you hear that? Among those selling the palliatives in modern market in Lafia are officials of Nasarawa State Emergency Management Agency and their accomplices in the market, notably modern market in Lafia, where the items were being resold. The suspects have, however, been handed over for appropriate disciplinary measures. Now, that's what we've been talking about, the palliatives diversion. Now, that's the Punch reporting on that. And New Telegraph is hitting on rising crude prices at its lead story. Now, fuel pump price may hit 800 naira without government intervention, and that's been attributed to Ipman. Says fuel scarcity looms in eastern Nigeria. Oil prices rise above $90 per barrel, and market expert predicts oil price to hit $100 per barrel. And of course, there are also many other stories trending on the front page. Fuel subsidy. We played politics with 2012 occupied Nigeria Fire Me, and poor compliance mass NLC's warning strike is also trending just below the picture story. And of course you see the picture story that it's President Tinubu and the Indian Swiss businessman, of course, during the meeting in New Delhi. Also trending, a quick one, gets flaring, reps query IOCs for underpaying penalties. And ahead of today's judgment, FHQ threatens deployment nationwide. IGP redeploys Frank Mba, other DIGs with immediate effect. And on the forum saying, Joe Biden tests positive for COVID, President negative. That's the source's White House. Global polls, INEC redeploys 2 recs, appoints Olumekun IVS chair. And CBN direct remittances to Nigeria fell by 18.9% to $241.2 million. All right, I think Chiwode.
Thank you, Claire. Let me start. You mentioned my name when you were talking about the palliatives that were reportedly diverted. I think I have the DSS Nasarawa officials traders for diverting palliatives. Claire, the truth about us is that many of us, I don't know whether they're in the majority, seize the slightest opportunity to do that which is inhuman and really perpetrate such a thing. When I hear Nigerians blame policemen, blame the government and all that, I usually laugh because I know some of the things that people do in their private capacities and all that. But let me say, whoever is diverting palliatives should know that these palliatives practically mean life or death to some people who are going to get it. It is that bad for some people. Yesterday, a man practically, I'm using practically too much now. A man almost fought me yesterday when I said, I like our walking, some of the distance to where the military checkpoint was, because it has forced some of us to exercise. We don't exercise in this. Oh, God, stop that thing. You know what I chop before I leave the house?
Well, he was being real. He was being real. He was being factual.
Should not be diverted, please.
Chooks, he was being real. The man that said to you, you don't know if I've eaten this one. He was being real and he was being factual. And again, just this morning on our way to the office, we were having a conversation, my colleagues and I, about these palliatives. And one of us, was emphatic that he didn't think that anyone could go to the extent of diverting the palliatives in the States. And I'm sure, he must have heard this morning that this is happening somewhere near us. And it is officials, government officials, who are selling this
you don't want to know the kind of people who do some nefarious things in this country. And your mouth will go agape.
The other day, sorry, Kieran, the other day, we hosted, some government representatives on Good Morning Nigeria to speak to Nigerians how, some of those states were distributing the palliative that they got, because there were allegations that some people were being given carbs or moodles, and this is what is going on in some parts of the state. When these palliatives are distributed, maybe in a 10 kg bag or in a 7.5 kg bag, people go back and resell this thing in carbs and in moodles. And then people who want to play some politics or some form of prank will go about with their, smartphones and record this and post on the social media, which is wrong.
I mean, you guys have spoken a lot about this. That's good. But what is clear to me from what you have, enunciated, is the fact that many people are going to make millions out of this palliative. Some people are going to buy cars after this palliative business, because even at some state, in the state level, politics will come in there. If you didn't vote for us, if you didn't vote for a party, the palliative will start sharing. Will start from somewhere else, and so on. And you may say persons who do not even need the palliative will go and get and even have stored ones, especially those in government. That's what's going to happen. I don't know when we have changed in our character. These are things that happen usually. Recall, when we had the Ebola thing, not Ebola, rather, what's the COVID-19. We had palliatives of COVID-19. Some of them were stored in warehouses and stuff. So when we had the issue of, SARS or whatever, I mean, people broke into those warehouses and brought about palliatives that were kept there, rice, milk, and all manner of items. I mean, so it's just like that. It's a good idea, but implementation, of course, is going to be an issue from what we are seeing so far.
We are calling attention to what is likely to happen, so let supervision be really intense. Yes. Sometimes in this country, you ask whether we need more etiquette than the religion would bandy about.
Chukwudi, I'm sorry, we will have to end this review, abruptly, because as you know, we have double, topics for conversation. There's the judgment, yes,
no problem.
And then, but I think what we should always do is to speak to us Nigerians, about the need to be our brother's keepers.
Yeah.
Now, not everyone, would be eligible for this palliative. The palliative is meant for the poorest of the poor, those who can afford, the vulnerable, the weak, the unsupported, and all that. Please ensure that they get to the right people. That's what we're asking. And if adequate plans are put in place and ensured, I'm telling you, whatever has been provided will reach at least 50%, if not, more, of, people who fall within this category.
Claire, thank you.
Yes.
Just one sentence on Judgment Day. I like today for so many reasons. I pull back from talking about politics and all that in this seat, for some reasons, because sentiment runs so wild in this country. But let me say that I'm happy that today a little relief will be felt by the judiciary, because I felt we had gone practically into blackmailing them. We were preemptive too much.
Again, like I said, we can't continue.
Yes,
we can't continue. Let's quickly go on a short break, and when we come back, please don't go away. We have a very interesting conversation. It affects you, it affects me, it affects everybody, and it is how to get the right, factual, and accurate information from government agencies. We'll be right back.
Well, it's good to know that you're still with us on Good Morning Nigeria for this morning. And of course, to give us a background to the conversation on effective information management in governance. Let's take this report put together by Ekene Ntulue.
May 29, 2023 signaled a new chapter in Nigeria's history, with President Tinubu sworn in as the 5th president in Nigeria's 4th republic. Apparently, the president envisaged the job will not be a walk in the park and came in armed with a renewed hope agenda, a document that encapsulates his plans for a better Nigeria. The president had campaigned on the renewed hope mantra, where he promised to carry out so many actions in building a more united, prosperous, and peaceful Nigeria. This has guided his actions since taking over power. Top on the list is security, tax reform, fighting corruption, and reducing waste in government, among others. His very first day on the role witnessed the removal of fuel subsidy, which many administrations have tried to do without success. The unification of the exchange rate windows also signaled his commitment to revamping the economy of the country. However, the economic realities occasioned by removal of fuel subsidy has been eliciting reactions from Nigerians who bear the brunt of the economic decision, which many consider a necessary evil. As the implementation of the renewed hope agenda gets underway, the huge task of restoring trust in government decisions lies on the shoulders of the Ministry of Information and National Orientation. The scourge of fake news and misinformation on social media about government means that the Minister of Information and National Orientation must be on his toes to disseminate accurate, timely, and reliable information about government policies and programs. What is the best way to achieve national reorientation for patriotism, unity, and peaceful coexistence? What is the best way to partner with the local and foreign media and public relations practitioners for greater results?
Ekene Ndudwe, thank you for the questions that you have raised in that background report. And to discuss the effective information management in governance, let me quickly welcome Professor Umar Pate. He's a very distinguished professor of mass communication and Vice Chancellor of Federal University, Kashere, Gombe State. We're glad to have you, sir.
Good morning, Claire, and good morning, Nigeria.
It's a pleasure to have you. Let me also welcome to the studio Dr. Ike Neleako. He's a brand new national president of the Nigeria Institute of Public Relations, NIPR. Dr. Neleako, thank you very much.
Good
I hope
morning.
you brought Neleako plenty.
Well, we try. Good morning, citizens of Nigeria.
You need to explain to Prof what ACO means.
You know, he will consult me specially for that. You know, he's a professor.
Yes. All right, gentlemen, you're welcome to the program. Actually, we are going to be dissecting effective information management in governance in Nigeria. And we're going to do a rewind to perhaps from 1999 or 2000, you know, to look at, do a general assessment of information management in governance in Nigeria, you know. And at the federal level, for instance, you know, we've had a number of ministers of information and culture who perhaps may not have much to do with mass communication or communication as a profession in the first place. Some of them did good management, you know, in their own right. But again, questions have arisen over the years as to look, what have we been able to achieve in terms of information management with respect to our dynamic situation as a country who also has a checkered political history. Professor Pat, come in here to do your own first assessment of what you think management of information you know, has been in governance in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. And once again, good morning, Nigeria. You cannot talk about governance without talking about information management as part of it, especially in a democratic era like our own. And if you take the Nigerian context, specifically coming from 1999 to date, like you have rightly mentioned, we have had different ministers with different kinds of backgrounds. My issue is you don't need to read mass communication to be a minister of information, but once you are there, you must be willing to learn and be tolerable to the ideas of those who are in the system. Know the various sectors that are involved in information management generally, both internally and externally. Some of the ministers that we have had did remarkably well in terms of trying to understudy and know what it entails for government to have effective machinery of information management. Some were more concerned with the propaganda aspect of governance, making noise generally and thinking that is what information management, without being careful with the machineries that are involved in the subsector. If you take the information subsector in Nigeria, for example, generally, you have broadcasting, you have the print media, you have the public relations sector, you have the advertising sector, you have the digital communication sector, and the training sector as well. So you need a comprehensive policy that could effectively coordinate the system for effective outcome of whatever that is desired. However, since 1999, this country has been struggling to come up with an acceptable, functional, and relevant communication policy, but we have failed. The first communication policy we have had in this country was in 1987 during the General Babangida regime under late Minister Tony Momo. And that policy served us very, very well. But by 1992-93, the policy had become obsolete because some of the provisions in that particular document were overruled by emerging situations. Now, in 1999 to date, several efforts were made to come up with a policy. Sometimes, I think, under the Obasanjo regime, a committee was set up under late Professor Alfred Okubo, the first professor of mass communication in Nigeria and a highly respected scholar. Some of us were part of that committee to come up with a comprehensive and a relevant, timely, acceptable communication policy, or if you want, information policy for Nigeria. That document was beautifully drafted with all the issues that need to be addressed in the sector. But as I'm talking to you, that policy document is still inside the drawers of the Ministry of Information, locked up. When the former minister came...
Out of curiosity, I'm just wondering,
Yes.
Can you share with us the content of that policy? What does it provide?
When the former minister, Aladilai Mohammed, came, I had the opportunity of interacting with him in his earlier days. And I raised this particular issue. I said to him, sir, one of the legacies you can leave for the information subsector in Nigeria is to go into the drawers of the Ministry of Information and get that document out and make it functional. Get it approved by the Federal Executive Council and then make it relevant. He said yes, and he even got the document out, sent it to me. I did some comments, sent it back to him. I consulted NIPS in Jos. We had a national conference on that particular document, sent the Kuru declaration on it to the government. But as I'm talking to you, that document simply is lying low. And the issue is it has even been overtaken by events. A good policy document shouldn't last more than maybe 5 years or so. But now, the document is almost obsolete, but it has yet to be implemented in Nigeria. Now, if you look at the document, there are sectors. For example, under broadcasting, you have what will be the policy of government on television broadcasting, on radio broadcasting, online broadcasting. If you go to training, we have. If you go to the print, there are. If you go to advertising, specific roadmaps and policy directions of government have been clearly given out. And how these sectors or subsectors within the sector can develop and give Nigeria a properly guided, or not, let's say not guided, but a properly and a relevant kind of information policy which will upgrade the subsector and make it move with contemporary evolving situations in the world.
All right, just for you to conclude, do you not think that the reason why such a document was not brought to the fore all these years is perhaps because the ministry has never had or has not had recently someone who is a professional? Because what we're talking about is it has professional bias.
He's a professional in public relations. Has he not been practicing public relations? I don't even think it's the problem of some of the ministers, but some of the people who work within the sector who should know and should advise the minister.
You know, your advice and
they are not interested.
Okay, thank you.
Anyway, I wouldn't want to hazard any reason why that document, but even if the document is to come out today, it has become obsolete. And I will tell you why later.
Professor Pate, thank you. Thank you for the somewhat concept clarification and for even giving us the information that there was now.
Currently, Nigeria has no guiding policy on information subsector.
Okay, so let me bring Dr. Neleaku. And Dr. Neleaku, but just before, while we were having our conversation, Jide Ojo walked into the, said, it's unlike Jide, you know, to come in late. Jide Ojo, I'd like to welcome you. Of course, he's a public affairs analyst and our own in-house, you know, analyst. Jide Ojo, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
It's good to see you in your traditional regalia.
Is this
Are you not a chief like some people here?
Well, maybe if I'm giving one, but
don't worry, it will come. It will come. Thank you for joining us. Dr. Neleaku.
Sorry for coming.
Please, just tell us, what exactly is information, management? And why does it seem as if, apart from few, periods in our history, where you actually have a government spokesperson, a minister of information, having a good or cordial relationship with the generality of the people, it's as if there is this constant, battle, disagreement, lack of confidence between the people and those who manage information from government.
Well, I would like to come from the perspective of communication. You know, for those of us who practice communication, information management, public relations, and so on and so forth, we come under the major sector of communication. Most times, we assume that information is communication, but it is not. And I believe that's where some of the challenges have arisen in the past. My learned professor, who is a distinguished fellow of the Institute also, talked about the fact that you don't necessarily have to be a communication person to be an effective minister of information. And I believe that he's speaking based on what we have seen by experience. He gave you two examples without, mentioning it. But you see, I believe that there is always the communicator and then the receiver. So I would take the communicator. For you to effectively communicate, I believe you should have at least one of two things. First, the gift of communication or the knowledge of communication. If you have the two, fantastic. But most times...
What is the difference?
I'm coming to that. You see, you could have the gift of communication, meaning that you didn't study communication, you didn't go to school, you didn't acquire the skills. You are a natural communicator. And what are the things that would make somebody a natural communicator? You are a people's person. Because communication comes from the heart. It is out of the abundance of the heart that the mouth speaks. So it is what you carry that you give out. If you now have somebody who does not carry the garment to communicate, and you go and place him in communication, what he will be spitting out will be fire. And as a result of that, the citizens will always reject such a communicator.
Before you go to the second part, are there markers, identifiable markers, to know that this person or this personality has the gift of communication?
When you speak, people will know. Are you speaking peace? Are you speaking fire? People will naturally know. I don't want to mention names, but I'll go back. Look at policies of government. You are looking at from 1999, but can we step back to even as far back as when we had some programs in the 90s, and then, or even in the 80s, let's start from 1985. Then we come to 87. This country had a national program in 1987 that touched the hearts of everybody. Why? Because the government spokesperson who carried that program at that time had the gift of communication. He wasn't a communication person, but you see, he carried it. Then I come to the second element of an effective communicator. You must understand your audience. Nigerians are very interesting people. Very interesting. One of the best people you can encounter in the world. We are not difficult to be convinced, but you must earn their trust. So you find out that when you don't realize or understand the people you are speaking to, the tendency is that you miscommunicate because you are not hitting the right target. And that brings me to the second component of acquired skills in communication. So if you don't have the gift, but you now have the skills, you should be able to know that you don't just jump out and begin to communicate. In 1999, there was an issue. Usually Nigerians will give you 6 months. Go and check it. Nigerians have endurance level of 6 months. After 6 months, you are gone or you are in. Go and check it from the time of Jara Yakubu Gowon to even the present administration. Once you exceed the 6 months threshold of Nigerians' patience to assess you, perceive you, place a kind of the kind of person that you are gone. And it starts from the head, usually. So in 1999, President Obasanjo had a challenge because he wanted to change a lot of things. He came with a reform agenda. Okay? But we are just coming out of military dispensation. Nigerians' mindset, the mindset of Nigerians were essentially militarized. And then communicating democracy in a militarized mindset was a fundamental challenge. And unfortunately, the Minister of Information at that material point in time did not understand the operating environment. So he was not able to communicate until there was a sudden change after about a year and a half. Somebody else came. And I followed the pattern. This person understood that the mantra now is that power belongs to the people. So you must take communication to the people. The citizens must hear you. The citizens must understand you. The citizens must respect you. The citizens must buy into the programs. Within those 6 months, if you recall, there were campaigns that democracy was failing, that this is not what they expected. Okay? The Ministry of Information at that time was struggling. But by the 18th month, a number of prominent Nigerians had begun to express disappointment in the quality of governance they thought they were expecting and what they had. Then came national media talk. If you recall.
Yeah, national media talk.
National media talk.
Let's pause you here.
Okay,
of course,
thank you.
You've come from a very good trajectory of information that you have shared with us this morning, which is very, very interesting and captivating as well for the younger ones who may not know the history. Now, we've just introduced Jido. Now, when he was talking about communication, effective communication, I'm sure we're not losing sight of the issue of feedback. Because when communication is effective, there has to be a feedback as well, to know whether what you're communicating is actually effective. And when he also mentioned that the citizens have to buy into what you are communicating. Remember, we had War Against Indiscipline in the 80s that cut across all generations, at that time, before it was abruptly, ended. I was thinking then that, look, Nigeria was returning to normalcy in terms of character, behavior, and what have you. So, Jido, we're talking about information management in governance. Let's have your own assessment before we go to some specifics, for this conversation. How would you assess the level of information management in Nigeria, if you like, since 1999?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. In my own view, I think it's more about, first, we need to understand that successive administrations have decoupled information and communication and have decided to set up separate Ministry of Communication and leave information and culture. So if communication is two ways, and you said information is telling people about what government is doing, every of the past Minister of Information has done its bits because they are to inform. There is somebody else that is to communicate. And I came in when Professor Patti was talking about the policy. I recall you and I, sir, we were at NIPS to review these documents some years ago. Where has it ended? Because successive Minister of Information sees propaganda as a better alternative for them than communicating. So they want to sell the government. And people are resisting and say, what you are selling us is bad product. We are not seeing good governance. So whether you go on media talk from now to eternity, people are going to be scrutinizing. How much did you spend on this road that you are commissioning, that you want us to applaud you? You want to do a runway for airport, it's costing more than building a whole new airport from the scratch. And you say, oh, this is my achievement. And people, you know, like the immediate past administration say, oh, people are not appreciating the government. And the president, former President Buhari, laid the blame on his media team. But they are not to blame. People are, you know, and that's what I always preach. You have to lower your expectation of each administration that comes in. Because when somebody is telling you he's going to change water to wine, you have to ask, has he done so previously? Where has it previously done so? So I think our successive Minister of Information has used the tool of propaganda more than communication or even information. And they are rather too impatient with the public who seems to ask probing questions and said, we are not on track. I recall Center for Democracy and Development in 2017 or thereabout came out with a matrix of Buhari meter. And Buhari meter was to track performance of President Buhari in the core areas of his campaigns. I think they came up with over 200 promises that the president said he was going to do in his first term. At the end of the day, what we saw was dissonance. The media team said, oh no, the president didn't promise this one. You cannot ask him that he should do this one. So it becomes like, okay, what exactly did the president promise? If you say he didn't promise this much, it was the party chairman that promised this one. It was one of the party leaders that said this. So you can't hold the president to it. But whatever it is, I think Nigerians are not as gullible as we may want to believe. It is just about lack of good governance that has made our information management to be very sticky for the managers. Because you want to tell, I've had, I mean, in the first tenure of President Buhari, the media team came out and said he has achieved 35 things. And I recall that in my column in The Punch, I took each of those 35 and tried to analyze. Could this actually be taken as an achievement, or is a work in progress, or something that is even in the pipeline, something that has not really or essentially been accomplished? So, long story short, I think it's not so much about not knowing what to do. It's about whether the government in which they serve actually deliver. And if the government did not deliver on its campaign promises, like Matthew Cuomo, 52nd governor of New York, said, politicians campaign in poetry and they deliver in prose. So when you wanted to just hype, achievements that are not seen, that are not palpable, that you cannot track, you have to be economical with the truth. So you start and say, oh, you people, you are not appreciating us. We met an empty treasury and we are doing more for less and all of that. People didn't elect you to come and lament. People saw the other candidates before they voted for you because they believe in your change agenda, they believe you can solve their problem. So if you are not solving their problem and you are giving excuses, people are likely going not to accept, no matter the grammar you speak, no matter the technique of communication. Because I recall that at the I'm sorry I'm using too much of the immediate past administration. I recall that at the beginning of Buhari's administration, there were town hall meetings that were held across the geopolitical zones, you know, telling and showcasing what the president is doing. But it's more of what the president is doing than what the president has done. And people waited patiently. Oh, you said he's doing this, he's doing that. Oh, we commend him for those initiatives. They are groundbreaking. But how much of accomplishment have you had that you want us to celebrate? So, information management, even when you bring somebody who is a rookie, who is not well-grounded like Professor Pate or Doc here, there are experts within the ministry that can properly guide a minister on what he is supposed to do. But I think it's just about, I need to keep my job. And in keeping my job, I need to be seen to be saying something. Okay. Whether that something is true or false.
Jude, thank you. Thank you for your thoughts. Prof, I need you to marry or, you know, situate the points that, you know, Jude and Dr. Neliako have raised. The lack of trust and misunderstanding that, you know, exists and have existed between information and communication managers and the people. Is it for lack of skill or strategy, as Dr. Neliako, you know, opined? Or is it thrive on propaganda, and or because they don't have anything, you know, to say, therefore thrive on propaganda?
Thank you very much, Claire. First of all, let's understand what do we mean by information within the context of communication management. Information has a very simple definition. It is uncertainty reduction. That is what information is. If you reduce the level of uncertainty that exists on the minds of your audiences, you are informing them. If you give them information that is confusing, you are misinforming them. If you give them information that is not truthful, you are disinforming them. If you give them information that is based on ignorance, you are malinforming them. So you may think you are doing your job by informing the people, but what you are doing, you are rather poisoning their psychology and misdirecting their thinking towards negativity instead of positivity. A lot of the times, some of our ministers think propaganda is the same thing with information management, without first of all understanding the concept and definition of what information is or communication is. We have a very simple model in communication which can direct you. Look at the source, look at your encoding system, look at your channel or look at your message, look at the channel you are using, and then look at the decoding system as well as who the receivers are. Of course, there will be the feedback pattern, and of course, there will also be probability of noise. And you need that critical element of what we call frame of reference in that links the sender and the receiver. Many of the times missing in Nigerian context. Now, propaganda simply, or let me give you the concepts. Propaganda, public relations, public opinion, advertising, polemics, preaching, they are all built on one concept, persuasion. They are all built on theory of persuasion. But where you differentiate them is in the intention of the sender of the message. A preacher uses the same kind of tools to talk to you. The Minister of Information, who basically is involved in propaganda, does the same thing. The advertiser is also convincing you. The public relations man is in the business of persuasion. So they are all about persuasion. But what is the intention of the propagandist? What is the intention of the preacher? What is the intention of the advertiser? That is where you can conceptually differentiate them. And if you want to be involved in propaganda, you have to identify certain elements. First, in a governance system like ours, naturally you have people who are your supporters. No matter what happens, they are for you. They are already converted. Number two, you have those who are in the middle. They don't care whether it is you or the other person. It's none of their business. Then you have the third category who have never been yours and they will never ever be yours. And then you have the external audiences who are not necessarily within Nigeria, but you need to paint a correct picture for them to see and appreciate that you are in control. So when our propagandists in governance are engaged in this, do they really understand these concepts, or do they simply assume that it is either you are for them or you are against them? Now, you must also have a clear, specific message to deliver. One of the best times for propaganda in this country was during the Babangida period, when he had MAMSA, which eventually transformed into national orientation. And you can see national orientation now has gone into some kind of shadows. So you must have clear messages that you intend to give the audiences. Then you must also identify who are going to receive the messages. And we don't do research. We don't do research. Then you must have the specific channels to deliver. NTA is one, FRCN, our newspapers, our state radio stations, and various other agencies. Are we equipping them effectively for them to deliver in this period of digital communication? Or are we still thinking that they should serve within a digital era using analog equipment? Or are you saying that you are going to have analog managers to manage digital equipment? You know, it can't work. So you have to identify and prepare the machines or the equipment and the personnel that we deliver. Then understand the psychology of the receivers themselves, who are Nigerians. The president of NIPR spoke extensively about the nature of the Nigerian audience. You have to understand them. And if you understand, how do you reach them? But above all, performance must go with communication. You cannot simply be talking and creating some imaginary situation and sometimes arrogantly trying to talk down to the people, thinking that you are in government. When you are negotiating with labor, you come with some kind of arrogant positions and expect people to understand. When you go to the people, you speak arrogantly on them. And they have the right to reject. They may listen to you, quite all right, but they are not convinced. So what is happening is that there's what you call cognitive dissonance and cognitive consonance in the minds of Nigerians. When you tell them that you have provided water, when you tell them that you have provided palliatives, in the media you have made so huge source of noise with hypes that there is plenty of this and that. Yet, in their own pockets and in their own stomachs, they are feeling hungry, looking wretched, and as if some Koshoko infested citizens. When you see them, and then you are now telling them, you want them to hear that they are living good. There is what you call cognitive dissonance that is created in their minds. So they will simply dismiss you with their information. In fact, you only amuse them. They will just look at you and laugh when you speak.
This one, they talk to themselves.
Yes, they will look at you and laugh. And then they now ignore you with your information. You are there talking to yourself. They are there on their own performing what they are doing. That's the kind of situation.
Yes, Prof, you are indeed right, because when I find my way in a mechanic workshop, for any reason, yes, I normally sit down with them, mechanics and allied workers, vulcanizers, panel beaters, and there's one of them who normally buys newspapers every day, one of them. So they keep analyzing. I'll be watching them dissecting Nigeria properly.
Yes.
Some of them are graduates, some have left just high school and learned a trade. And they understand what Prof is saying. They understand Nigeria. So when you are feeding them with one
there is a total distrust of the Nigerian elites.
Exactly.
Among the Nigerian people.
Yeah, so Prof, you really brought in some professorial, analysis here, because I'm learning new words, that information is uncertainty reduction. I've never had that before, so we're glad we brought in this aspect of to the conversation this morning. And now, Doc Neliako, talking about information management, I heard in the past that there can be no effective development without communication. And that is why exactly what Prof said, that look, a community can reject a project because that's not what their desire. And you are forcing them to accept what they do not desire because you want to perhaps fulfill a promise made by whoever that it is. And Prof said something here, that from information you feed people, they get their psychology poisoned and again begin to misdirect their reasoning. And when that happens, of course, if you are into propaganda, it is not working. I want to believe that propaganda works during wars. You know, when you claim you've captured where you didn't capture and stuff like that. So, Prof, what do you make of this tool called town hall meeting? You know, which of course the previous administration, you know, brought to the fore. I mean, it was like an everyday thing. Even members of National Assembly are now into town hall meetings and what have you. Does it bring anything new in terms of trying to have effective communication between the governed and, of course, the governors?
I would like to take this from the perspective of concept and content. Yeah, good concept, town hall meetings. Of course, we used to have town hall meetings in our villages and our communities. And it has always been an essential way of interfacing with the community. But you see, Kirian, the issue is about the content. From what Prof has said and from what Jide has said, the issue is very clear. If the content of what you're giving does not meet expectation, the tendency is a rejection. Clear. Nigerians have been taken through town hall meetings that are not based on facts or not even based on truth. You bring people to town hall meetings and you're lying to them. And unfortunately, they get information while you are speaking. They are downloading information. They are reading the things. They are seeing the lies. I'll give you an example. One practical example. Some years back, I won't mention the year so that you don't know the person. This person was having a press conference at the NUJ Center here in Abuja. Something else was going on at the State House. And he was lying to them that government has done this, they are going to do this, they will deal with this, so, and so on. And then the government was taking a decision outside this particular person. And eventually they took their decision. You know, State House correspondents have their counterparts. So those who were attending the press conference when the State House correspondents sent information of what has just transpired. So one of them, very mischievous person, said, Madam Minister, sir, you have just told us this. Are you aware that so was going on in the State House and that a decision has just been taken in respect to this matter, and the decision is contrary to what you have been telling us in the last 40 minutes? How do you explain that, sir? The man said, I'll get back to you. He entered his car with his outfit and left. Because he was feeding people lies. Which brings me to the next issue that I would want to talk about.
Okay, I'd like you to just hold it. We want to take a break. We must pay our commercials. Dr. Nedako, just hold your thoughts, please. Okay. Yes, when we come back. Let's quickly take a short break now. All right, welcome back to the program. Good morning, Nigeria, live on the network service. And I had posed Dr. Ike Neliako. And I must say that the example you gave, quite an interesting one, and of course in character with some of our colleagues. But please, I allow you now to conclude your thoughts. So
I will now come to the third dimension.
Yes.
I'm sorry to tell you that most, not some, not many, most of our information ministers are outsiders to power.
How do you mean?
There's a difference between being a minister in government and being a minister in power. For you to be an effective information minister, you must be a minister in power. What it means is that you have access, uncontrolled, unfettered access to the source of what is going on. The example I just gave you arose because the minister in question was in government, but he was not in power. So he wasn't part of the decision-making process. Certain meetings can go on without him. Nobody was missing him. And that's what usually happens. when you have a leader whose aides are highly manipulative, they don't understand the value of content of information that must go out. So you have many ministers guessing what should be the mindset of the president. They don't know. And that's why they don't have content.
Okay,
and then in not having this content, they now come out there and make up some of the things that they thought is the mindset of the president. But more importantly, when you don't have, even in that situation, you don't have anything to sell to the people in terms of projects, in terms of expectations, in terms of what they want to hear, in terms of what they are looking for, then the tendency is that it's a total collapse.
Okay, you want to add to that? Okay.
The state and the local government level. We have just been focusing on the federal. What happens at the state?
The same thing is the same principle. I can even give you two instances of a commissioner of information that would never be allowed. He only shows up at EXCO meeting, and that's all he takes. So after EXCO meeting, he briefs the EXCO, and that is the content that he has.
Okay.
Any other thing is not available.
Could you remember that there was a time in this country a certain ethnic group came out openly to protest that almost all the time they are only giving Ministry of Information. And the assumption is that in Ministry of Information there's no money. Yes,
but
they wrote openly and protested.
Apart from the minister, we also have other, officers who equally, disseminate information.
But the authorized one
it flows from the
minister.
It flows from the
I want to get
from the head.
Yes, Gido, to talk on this now. We have Ministry of Information and National Orientation presently. That's what what it is now. Unlike previous ones with the Ministry of Information and Culture. What is the advantage here, so to speak? Because we've discussed NOA for a long time, and the Prof also mentioned something that it went down over the years after it successfully launched a war against indiscipline. Those good old days when we are trying to reverse our thinking pattern. This time around, it is now being incorporated into information. Of what sense does that make? What is your reading? Will it bring up, because part of our issue in the country is reorientation, lack of reorientation. Yeah.
Actually, it's a good thinking now that we have culture and tourism out of Ministry of Information. Well, I have had cause to query why we calibrated or divided Ministry of Information into three. Because now you have creative economy, arts, culture, creative economy, you have tourism, and then you have Ministry of Information and National Orientation. I think part of the challenge has been improper funding deficiency. We all criticize National Orientation Agency, but each time I've been at events together with the Director General, he keeps talking about paucity of funds. And, given the number of private and public radio and TV stations, if you are going to sponsor adverts, even 30 seconds adverts, across board, you know how many billions you will need. And if you go doing road shows, people just mock you. People just laugh at you and say, these people should just give way, let me ply my trade. Government is not feeding me. And I pray that the new Minister of Information and National Orientation, being an entrepreneur, a media entrepreneur, a public relation expert, will start with what my Prof said about that policy first. Let's revive that policy and let's implement. And let's also coordinate with other, and the task of Minister of Information is now more Herculean. You know why I'm saying this? Because now to get your facts and figures right across about 34 ministries from the previous 28 is Herculean. So you now need, if you want to face the press, you now need to have those facts and figures you are likely going to be asked questions on. You earlier asked Doc here about the usefulness of town hall meetings. In most of the town hall meetings, it's all the time that the Minister of Information actually want to lie to the public. But they don't also want to appear like a buffoon by not having something to say when you are asked about activities of a ministry or agency in which you do not have adequate information. So what needs to be done and done differently is proper funding of even agencies like NTA, like Radio Nigeria, like Voice of Nigeria, like the News Agency of Nigeria. These are government-owned agencies that are supposed to work in tandem, and of course, not forgetting National Orientation Agency. These are agencies that are supposed to work with the Ministry of Information in terms of content, in terms of dissemination, and in terms of feedback. And that's why, Prof was talking about digital communication. How do you want to have effective communication when you are using analog equipment in a digital age? And it still comes down to funding, proper funding, motivation of staff, not just staff of the Ministry of... And this brings me to the issue I raised in one of my recent publications. NCC staff, National Communication Commission staff, are well paid. They are on special salary, from what I learned. But here in NTA, people are still paid civil servant salary. That is inappropriate, because you are serving. It's supposed to, what is sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. You are not working 8 to 4, to the best of my knowledge. Yeah. There are those who resume work at 6, 7 a.m. and don't close until 9, 10.
No, so
why should you be paid? Why shouldn't you be on special salary scale like people in that Ministry of Communication?
And need that. They have special salary as well.
So these are issues. So if you don't have motivated staff, how can they perform? How can they do their work? Situations where there are not even enough offices, enough equipment, the equipment is archaic, there is no replacement of, or even acquisition of latest technology in information communication technology that can help the work of a minister and its agencies that are under him to perform. These are issues that needs to be looked into. And unless and until you have it, change of nomenclature will not help. Because you move from information and culture, you now say information and national orientation. And so what? So you have changed the title, but what will change in terms of operations?
And content.
And so in terms of operations, in terms of content, in terms of staffing, in terms of motivation, in terms of incentives for the staff that are going to work to package this. And then how is the coordination? Now we have Minister of Health and Coordinating Minister of Health. We have Coordinating Minister of Economy. We should have Coordinating Minister of Information, who gets briefed, not just at fake meetings, get briefed about activities of, because every ministry have information officer. They have press secretaries, that serves with the minister. How much of liaison do you have between those who work in the press units of those ministries, departments, and agencies, and then the minister in the Ministry of Information and National Orientation.
All right, Jide,
These are the synergy that needs to be built so that the ministry and the minister can be very effective in its task of information dissemination.
Thank you for the points that you phrased. Let's now mainstream our conversation now to the new minister and his expected roles. Prof, I'd like you to evaluate for us the magnitude of responsibility that he has against the following variables. One, the nature of Nigerians at the moment, what Nigerians are going through and the expectations. Two, you also look at the fact that the traditional media space, is shrinking, of course, by the advent of social media, and everyone now, like he said, just, with the use of smartphone, you can get as much information as, you would. And finally, also, taking into cognizance the new nomenclature, information and national orientation.
Thank you very much, Claire. First of all, as the Minister of Information for Nigeria in today's Nigeria, he needs to understand the complexity of Nigeria. Nigeria is not made up of one ethnic group or one religious group. He needs to understand the multiculturality as well as the pluralistic nature of Nigeria, one. Then understand what are the current challenges of Nigeria. Conflict, terrorism, devastating poverty, failure of governance, and all these these are things that will continuously erode the confidence of government in the minds of people. There are many. The demons are many. So after identifying them, we must also think of how we can structure information that can address some of these issues directly or indirectly. Now, going back to what the current minister may need to do, after assuming that he's clearly informed about Nigeria and Nigerians and the size of Nigeria. Nigeria has about 230 million people, and you cannot rule them by force. You cannot. The only way you can rule them, particularly in a democratic era, is through conviction. It's through conviction, good governance, by bringing them together. And in all of these things, we now have alternative sources of information dissemination. The social media is there also giving its own kind of information, sometimes that erodes confidence, sometimes distributes fake news, sometimes distributes hate speech that are undermining our unity, affecting our progress, and all of these kind of things. So what will he need to do? Having a clear understanding of these things. First, get a functional information policy that will guide and help you to coordinate the sectors in the information subsector. Apart from that one, then ensure that you are able to understand the current problems in the information dissemination area created by the advent of the internet as well as the development in ICTs. And what are some of these? I can easily summarize them for you. One, Jide talked about funding. Funding model that we know is collapsing. NTA, FRC, and our newspapers can no longer depend on advertising alone because there are alternative media organizations coming up on the internet that are also taking away these adverts. So we can no longer depend on adverts. We need alternative ways of funding. So organizations must be encouraged to come up with thoughts on how they could develop alternative ways of funding, issue of subscription and all of that. Then secondly, technology. Technology is the enabler in information dissemination. Without technology, you cannot have the reach. So with technology, you can have the reach. So we must invest in technology. The minister must have his attention focused on technology for information dissemination at all levels across the country, and the same thing at the state level. Then apart from technology, you must talk about content. What kind of content do we want to disseminate to Nigerians? Content requires creativity, requires money, and requires effort. Then, of course, issue of credibility. We just talked about misinformation, disinformation, and others. So, credibility of information. And of course, issue of safety of the journalists themselves or the media professionals who work in the system. There should be no reason why journalists should be dying unnecessarily. They should be harassed. You have gender safety, online safety, physical safety, and most importantly, economic safety of those who work in the system. If the minister is able to understand some of these things and have a clearly defined information policy that can guide the sector, I can assure you he's going to leg up. And he must be able to draw a line between propaganda and information. At what time, at what point will they need to propagandize on government issues? And at what time will they need to also inform? There must be a clear distinction.
Would he have the powers? Would he actually be a minister in power? Would he have the power to give this factual information
like this one? If you are lucky in your ministry to have a minister that has the listening ears of the president and who is shrewd enough to be involved, then you are lucky. But you see, like I've told you, there's this misconception in governance that, information, just push anybody there. Just send anybody there.
Remember, I'm going to call him.
And so he may not even be part of the power structure.
Remember the former minister, Chikere? That was one minister,
It was during his time that policy issue came up. It was during his time that this policy was developed.
Prof, if we actually delve into, the activities of the past ministers of information, we're going to unravel so many things, So let's leave it there. Dr. Neliak has been avoiding mentioning of names because he knows a lot. He's been around.
If we have examples,
in journalism, what we say is to create. To name, to suggest is to create. To name is to destroy.
I agree with you, sir.
Don't name.
Now,
just suggest.
Now, let's talk about fake news, gentlemen and lady here. Fake news, misinformation, disinformation, hate speech, and what have you. That have all found their way into the social media, which of course you have mentioned that everybody is a journalist as case may be. People send information here and there. People just information without even digesting or dissecting such information, will just share it around the globe. And it's been happening. And that's no...
share widely.
Exactly, share widely. But please follow me, share, So, and we have no regulatory authority over this or regulatory policy over this. And in many countries, especially even the Western countries, have done that. To say, look, you cannot castigate Jide, for instance, online, because you have access to your phone, you can do that and share. He can take you to court and get something out of you. Now, what can that do for us? We're talking about information management. What can the Minister of Information and Orientation and the National Orientation do to perhaps attract some kind of policy, as Prof said, to see how we can control the menace that we're seeing on the internet these days?
Okay, Kirian, it's a very difficult thing. I must be honest. It's like regulating the air. The reality is that, of course, they have this association of online publishers, GOCOP, if I recall. Yes, they can be engaged. But what happens to the average housewife who does not belong to any association? How do you regulate what she shares? People are cameramen on their own. They are reporters. They are writers. They are disseminators, and so on. So I believe that the Minister of Information and the Ministry of Information will require effective creativity. This is the time that creative engineering is required in managing information. And I think it's important to note that the minister took off on a good note. Why do I say so? His first outing at the National Press Center, when he was received, he said, he said, the president has told me to tell you that I will not lie to you. That's a high moral ground that he has placed himself. And I know that I was in some places and the matter came up and people reacted and said, that's how they talk. Okay? Even him saying so, they said, that's how they talk. But somebody else said, but nobody has ever told us that I will not lie as a Minister of Information.
Okay, because we're running out of time, Doctor. Yes, I'd like you to tell us the nexus between being a member of NIPR and, effective functioning in the office of the Minister of Information or whatever? Because you've always clamored that, information managers or communicators must, be a member of the NIPR. What value does NIPR add?
I will just tell you the value that public relations adds to anybody. Strategic communication. That's one thing you should not forget. Strategic communication. You can be an information manager. You can have the content, but how do you deploy the content? When do you deploy the content? What is the emotion that should go with a particular content? It is never the same. And the challenge has always been that even when you have the information and you don't deploy the information effectively because you don't have the scale of strategic communication, that creates a problem for you. PR will tell you that you must monitor trends so as to know how to communicate. PR will teach you that you need research. PR will teach you that you must understand your stakeholders. So you must do stakeholder mapping, stakeholder engagement, stakeholder management. And if you miss some of these things, you are not likely to be able to communicate. PR will teach you that how you say certain things will be different from how a typical person would say it. And that is what makes the difference. That's why you can tell somebody go to hell. He's happy going to hell. Because you have given him the impression, the perception that going to hell is what he needs to have hope, to be well. You can also tell somebody go to hell and he will tell you waka. Because the nuances of the communication make the difference.
How is it different from diplomacy?
Before diplomacy is PR.
Exactly.
Diplomacy is PR.
Thank you. It is very
just
clear.
A different name.
And
that's why we say that nobody should leave this country to go and be ambassador of Nigeria without PR content.
Okay.
Because what they do is to sell.
Okay. Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc. Yes. Thank you, gentlemen. In fact, it's been a very interesting conversation, this morning. We're not out of time here, but then, as you told our viewers and you earlier on, the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal is set to deliver its judgment on the 3 consolidated petitions. Now, let's now join Dele Atumbi of our judiciary desk at the Court of Appeal, where the verdict is to be delivered. Dele, what is the situation presently at the court premises?
Well, the truth of the matter is that the Presidential Election Petition Court is delivering judgment today at the Court of Appeal. And immediately after the presidential election on February 25, 2023, 5 political parties filed petitions before the court. And the political parties are Action People's Party, Action Alliance, Allied People's Movement, Atiku Abubakar and PDP, Peter Gregory Obi, and the Labour Party. After the pre-hearing, during the pre-hearing section, 2 of the political parties withdrew their petitions. Action People's Party and Action Alliance, AA. Those 2 political parties definitely withdrew their petitions. And the court, as at that time, was left with 3 petitions. And the petitions are the Allied People's Movement, the one filed by Atiku Abubakar and his political party, as well as the Peter Obi and the Labour Party. These petitions were consolidated and in line with paragraph 50 of the first schedule of the Electoral Act 2022. And today, the court is giving verdict on the 3 remaining petitions. And that is what we expect the court to do any moment from now.
Just nod your head for me if you can hear me, and I hope you can hear me. We understand that 5 justices will be deciding, this particular case today. Will be given judgment.
It's very tight. It's more or less a media issue, and it will be there will be live telecasts of the proceedings in the court as at the time I'm talking to you.
I'm asking about the justices that will be given judgment today. Can you tell us a little bit about them? Can you hear me? Can you talk to us about the justices that will be given the judgment today? I'm afraid they cannot hear us. We'll just have to leave it at that. Hopefully, before we end the program, we should be able to return. If not, of course, we'll have him on the news at 10. So let's bring in Jide now. Jide, what strategy do you think the new minister, should take in carrying out his responsibilities? Because the president, was emphatic about what he wants from them. He has said to them, you must deliver and restore the confidence of Nigerians in government.
So for me,
that's very fundamental.
It's very fundamental, and we all know that from the first Federal Executive Council meeting, Minister of Finance have told us about the 8-point agenda of Tinubu administration. It is for him, as Minister of Information and National Orientation, to see, how his colleagues in the cabinet are carrying on with, implementation of this agenda. Unfortunately, I think maybe the president is waiting for the full complement of the cabinet for him to have a retreat with them. I had expected that they will have a day or two retreat where there will be shared understanding. In fact, those who have not read the Renew Hope agenda document will now all have copies and be able to read. But the technique is basically to have a well-coordinated fashion of receiving information from all his fellow ministers and cabinet and other cabinet members, so that he can propagate it adequately to the public.
All right. Yeah, Jide, thank you so much. At this point, we are rounding off this conversation for today. We thank you for being here. Jide Ojo, Public Affairs Analyst, we appreciate you being here this morning. Dr. Ike Neliako, the brand new National President of the Nigeria Institute of Public Relations. I'm going to be, well, I registered, but we're going to talk about that later. Professor Omar Upate, Distinguished Professor of Mass Communication and Vice Chancellor, Federal University Kashere in Gombe State. We're glad you are here this morning with us live.
Very much.
All right. Yes. And the fellow of NIPR. Okay. All right. All right. Well, we are concluding this edition of Good Morning Nigeria. We thank you for being here today with us in terms of our viewers who watch the program. Before I leave you, I drop one thing for you. You can buy a shoe for 5,000 naira at the Nyanya Maraba market. Same shoe you buy for 50K in a shopping mall. Think about it. I'll see you again tomorrow.
All right, I'm Claire Delabo Abdulrazak. Thank you for being with us. We will shortly be handing you over to our colleagues at our other studios for coverage and analysis of the ruling by the Presidential Petition Tribunal. Of course, my colleague Kingsley Osadolo will be anchoring the discussion. That will be in a short while. But for now, from me and the GMN crew, we thank you for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.